I will join you in that now. We also are recording. That has just started.
Well, thank you, John. And thanks to Richard and Shin and the New School in general, and to all of you for having me today. I'm very happy to talk to you all. Um, so let me share my screen. Can you see that mouth thing? Okay, good. Um, so I'm Nicole. I am a programmer, game developer, creative technologist. I don't know, just like these words that, depending on who's asking, basically, these different words to respond, describe what I try to do with my life. And today I'm going to talk about some of my work. I think today I'm going to do it a little differently from how I normally do it. I'm going to try to go in a pretty linear way to talk about my journey. And sorry, there's a train that's next to my apartment, so you're going to be hearing that a lot. But yeah, I want to talk sort of in a chronological order about my work. I think, particularly for a student audience, it's nice to hear how people sort of like got to where they are, because we didn't, come out of the womb as creative technologists or whatever. So I'm going to just start from the beginning, I guess. Not all the way from the beginning, but so I spent my early childhood in Canada, and then in fourth grade we moved to California. We moved to the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, um, and I think a lot of my it, I only realized this later, but I think a lot of my work reflects my personal mixed feelings about growing up in the Bay Area, surrounded by all technology companies. I went to NYU for undergrad, and having grown up around tech, I I feel like I did the sort of rebellious teenager thing where you just like want to get away from what you think you know, and so I was like, I'll never work in technology. It's like computers are boring, and like look where we are now. But anyway, I went to NYU to study journalism, though I never wanted to be a journalist. And afterwards, when I graduated, I did actually end up working at a tech company at Kickstarter, which is in New York City. And basically, my job there was a lot of like community management and outreach, things like that. Um, and you know, I I've been asked about like what is the catalyst for me doing sort of a career change from that to like whatever I'm doing now. And it really comes down to this arcade game called Killer Queen. I don't know if some of you might be familiar with this game. It's a 10-player arcade like arcade game. There's also like a Switch version, but the original is this 10-player arcade cabinet, and they got their start on Kickstarter. And there's a few cabinets around New York City, and there's like a pretty competitive league now. But anyway, back in the day, um, the Kickstarter office got one of the first cabinets, and this is a 10-player game, and we were all obsessed with it. So we were playing all the time instead of working, which I guess is what it's like to work in tech. But but basically, we were all wanting to play all the time. But there was a problem, and the problem was that the cabinet was downstairs, and everybody's workspaces were upstairs. And it's a 10-player game, so it was like people wanted to play, but you had to like know that there was a game going. And it was just kind of, I was like, why, we should have a way to tell people that somebody's about to start a Killer Queen game. Wouldn't it be great if somebody made like a button that you could push at the like arcade cabinet that would notify other people who are obsessed with Killer Queen in the office that a game is starting, so they come down. And I was like, somebody should make a button that does that. And nobody wanted to do that. And so I was like, okay, I guess I won't do that. I'll make a button. I literally have no idea how to do that. But luckily for me, I had some coworkers at Kickstarter who went to this graduate program at NYU called ITP, which I think is probably quite similar to your design tech program. And so they knew how to do things with Arduinos. And so they helped me. I mean, by helped me, I mean they basically did it, but basically they helped me make this button, which ended up looking like that. It's just a big button, bunch of messy wires connected to an Arduino. In retrospect, I would not have used an Arduino for this project, but anyway. And basically, all it did was you push the button, and then it tweeted from this account, this Twitter account, an alert. And then, you know, those of us that were obsessed with Killer Queen had like notifications set on our phone so that if the account tweeted, then you would like know to go downstairs to play Killer Queen. And so from here, I was like, whoa, that was really fun. How do I keep doing this kind of stuff in my life? And you know, it turns out that one way to do that was to go to ITP, go to grad school. And so I enrolled at ITP at NYU, still without actually a clear plan for my career necessarily, but I just knew that my job at Kickstarter was helping people make stuff, because my job was like talking to people about their creative projects and how to present them on the internet and things like that, and being exposed to a lot of different creative communities. But I was like, I want to make stuff. And so, so one thing that sort of was surprising was like when I got to ITP, I immediately fell in love with programming, which I did not like. I didn't know that that was going to happen, but I loved coding, it turns out. And so one of the first projects I made at ITP was this project called the True Love Tinder Robot. And so this was a robot I made in my first semester at ITP for our intro to physical computing, and also sort of our intro to programming class. And basically it was a robot that reads your feelings as you look at people on Tinder, and then it swipes left or right depending on whether or not it thinks you're into them. And this project really, I think, did a lot for me in my life, because coming into ITP, I was like, I don't have any skills that are useful, you know, because some of my classmates already knew how to code, or they already were designers, or like had other, you know, useful skills. And I was like, I just worked at Kickstarter, and I like, which is fine, but I was like, I don't have any useful skills. But actually, it turns out there was something that was useful, which was that so when I finished this project, I made this GIF. I think it was literally this one, and I just like tweeted it. And then suddenly it just started getting like a lot of retweets and stuff, and people were like paying attention to it. And then all these journalists suddenly emailed me like asking me about this project. And one thing I did learn from my days at Kickstarter is that it's important to like document your creative work especially if people are interested in it. And so I stayed up all night that night making a video, which I'll show you in a second, and basically building a website and like writing a bunch of stuff about this project. So yeah, so I'll show you this video. Oh, you're not hearing the sound? Sorry. Sorry. That's because I didn't. Okay, optimize. All right, sorry. Sorry about that. There was sound. Can you hear it now?
Yep.
Okay. It's very important, like computer commentary.
Hello, human. I am the True Love Tinder Robot. I'm going to help you.
Sorry, just froze. It wouldn't be a Zoom presentation without, you know, technical difficulties.
Hello, human. I am the True Love Tinder Robot. I'm going to help you find love. You can trust me because I am a robot. Let's begin. Look at this person. Swipe right. Judge this person. Swipe left. I can read your feelings. No match here. Determine if this person has any value. Nope. Can you see yourself spending your life with this person? You're not very picky, are you? Go away now. Please take your hands off the sensors. Goodbye and good luck with your love life.
Okay, so so this project was really worth the effort of documenting because basically then, you know, one thing that you learn is that when you write about a project, a lot of journalists are very lazy and they will literally copy and paste what you said about it, which is a useful tip, I think, for students in particular, why it's worth it documenting your projects, because this project also got me invited to like showcase it in conferences in different countries and stuff like that. So that was like sort of the beginnings, I guess, of my new career. My graduate thesis was a computer algorithm that calculated the best art project to make for any given moment in time, and it printed out a piece of paper. And I also ended up like doing a bunch of them. So like, for example, this one said, produce a domestic surveillance that feels blank. And then what I made was like this webcam pointing at the wall. This one says, build 3 photocopy typewritten pages in opposition to trucks. So I made this, I did that basically. And then, here's one, create a carrot that evokes larger social issues. And so it was, it was interesting for me because especially, going through school and making stuff and not having a lot of time to think that hard about the things that I was doing and just doing things for homework and trying new things. But I realized sort of afterwards, or as I was going through this process, that like looking back at a lot of the things I was making, there started to be a thread of like ideas or concepts that it turns out I was interested in. And sometimes it's like, you don't necessarily know what you are interested in until you've like been forced to make something for homework. And then you look back and then you're like, oh, okay, there's some commonalities here. And one of the things I think I realized I was interested in is like the gap between the state of technology as it exists versus our expectations of technology, usually as informed by science fiction. And I do think a lot of the reason why I'm interested in this creatively has to do with having grown up in Silicon Valley. So another way to say is there's sort of the gap between the mundane technology of AI versus the character of AI that lives in our popular imagination. So like this versus that. And I'm particularly interested in the personification of AI, and I think a lot of my projects are around that idea. So after I graduated from ITP, I got a job at Google Creative Lab as a creative technologist. They don't have like an official website for the team, but if you go to experiments.withgoogle.com, you'll see a lot of the work from the Creative Lab, at least from the creative technology side. So I worked there for 2 years, and this was the place where I did a bunch of different things, but I was really focused, or a large number of my projects there were related to voice technology, because it felt like an extension of the stuff that I was already doing. And, when I was doing in school, like I was pretty interested in sort of like text-based work. And just like, again, sort of the idea of personification of AI and things like that. And so voice technology was sort of a natural extension of that. And so I did a bunch of projects there. I'll show you a couple of the weirder projects that I did at the Creative Lab. So one was this very strange experiment I did in the collaboration with an artist, Iran Hilali. Basically, we're doing like voice and AR. So I'll show you this video.
Oh, hello. I'm so glad you're here. I've been waiting so long for someone to show up. To be honest, it's pretty lonely around here. Tell me, what is your name?
name is Michael.
Nice to meet you, Michael. I really need your help. I need to plant a beautiful garden so that other people will come visit me and I can make more friends. But I don't have arms. So please take this seed and plant it somewhere. Well, it's a start, Michael. But this tree could look better. I heard plants like it when you talk to them. Why don't you say something nice to this tree?
I think you're a very boring looking tree.
Michael, I said say something nice. That wasn't nice. Look what you did, Michael. Try saying something nicer.
Just kidding, you're a beautiful and extraordinary tree.
Well said, Michael. The tree seemed to like that. But we've got more to do.
Brown and teal.
Teal and brown. Interesting combination. Splendid. Well done, Michael. I think we've planted a lovely garden with my creative direction and your arms. People will definitely want to visit my garden now and become my friend.
Yeah, so that was a good one. And then just another weird one is we made this project called AIAIO. It was a game, a farm animal related game where basically it was an installation we created for an event, which is Google I/O. And basically people could train models on themselves making animal noises, and then basically it was like a racing game. So I'll show you a quick video of how that worked. And we worked with this like fabrication company to build this like incredible thing, the physical part. But basically, yeah, we're making animal noises and making the little cars move, basically, depending on how well we're matching up to the models that we trained. It was very chaotic. Yeah, so that was another good one. And you know, it was a real privilege to work at Google Creative Lab. At the same time, though, I was sort of still doing my personal practice, like creative practice on the side. And I feel like I was very lucky and privileged that what I was doing in my day job was the same kind of stuff, I guess, as what I wanted to do for like fun or for myself. So, you know, there's lots of positives about that, which is that you get to, like, the things that I was learning at work were useful for me outside of work. But at the same time, yeah, I was doing other stuff as well. And so I'll show you a couple of those projects. So in 2018, I was invited to do an exhibition in Melbourne. So I made a couple of projects for that. And so the exhibition was at a bar. It was like a video game bar. I mean, not like barcade or something. Like, they had this aesthetic. It was like trash games was like their whole thing. And but it was also a real bar. But so they were like, you know, there's like spaces to put projects, but then also like they're like, we also have obviously we have a bathroom. If you want to put something in there, you could put a project in there. And so I was like, okay, that's an interesting challenge. Like, what kind of installation can you put in a bathroom? And so I came up with a secret dunny box. Apparently dunny is like Australian slang for toilet or something. So this is like a toilet joke project, so I apologize for that, but just to show you.
Welcome to the secret dummy box. The last person who left their bodily fluids in this restroom also left a message that only you will hear. But if you want to listen to it, you must first leave a message for the next person who visits the loo. To leave a message, press and hold the button while you speak.
Don't forget to wash your hands.
Thank you for your message. I will pass it on to the next person who empties their bowels in this facility. Now, here is the message the previous pooper left for you.
Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Okay, that is all. I hope you enjoyed your time with the secret dunny box.
Anyway, so that was a project also using voice technology, but sort of more about like intimacy and things like that. And it's not the kind of thing I could necessarily do at Google. Another project I made is called Enhanced Computer, and this is a game that's an homage to the sci-fi trope, where you might have seen it, if you're watching sci-fi or like police shows and things like that, or basically people are standing in front of a screen yelling like enhance and zoom in and stuff like that. So this is a game that lets you do that essentially, and it was interesting because like this is a project using voice technology, but it's also very much about voice technology. So like one thing that I actually didn't really expect to happen was that when I made it, like some people actually played it on like, well, I didn't expect that people would actually play it, but also like that people would make these like let's play videos. And there are some really good ones, but there's one that just like is my favorite of all time. I'll show you this.
Begin investigation. Okay. Enhance. 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 Fuck.
Enhanced.
Enhance.
Enhanced.
Enhance.
Enhanced.
Te lo estoy diciendo la computadora. Enhance. 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 Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you.
Anyway, I'm sorry to that man, but it was really interesting for me because this was also, related to some of the like creative ideas that in general I'm interested in exploring. Like I mentioned earlier, that gap between how we expect technology to work and how it actually works. And another themes that I'm interested in is just like, what does it feel like to let computers make personal decisions for us? What does it feel like to talk to computers that can understand us or computers that do not understand us? I think this is the last project I'm going to share today. This was a project I did with Vogue magazine this year. It feels like it's 1,000 years ago now, but I think this was in like February. Basically, Billie Eilish, who, if you don't know who she is, there's nothing I can do for you, but she's just, she's a very famous musician. And basically the premise, Vogue does a lot of celebrity interview videos. And the premise for this is that Billie Eilish would be interviewed by an AI. And so what I did was basically I fine-tuned GPT-2 to basically trained on all the interview questions that people have ever asked Billie Eilish in public, and then it would come up with new questions. So see, this video is like 12 minutes long, but just to show you a bit of it.
I have examined all 170 million search results for Billie Eilish, and I have created questions based on these results.
I'm ready.
I'd like to start by saying how much I love your music as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so here is the first one. What are you like?
I think that's up to everybody else to decide what I'm like.
Next question. Who consumed so much of your power in one go?
Say it again, it sounded good.
Who consumed so much of your power in one go?
That's a great way to put that. See, if I name them, I'm toast.
Was there a point where you decided you'd rather look up to the sky or the internet?
You know what? There actually was kind of a point.
So there's another part of it where basically we also trained, or we trained the model on Billie Eilish lyrics to come up with like a new Billie Eilish song, and then so I think this next clip has her sort of reacting to that.
Okay. How did I do?
Well, it doesn't make sense, and I don't see any like structure. I do think it's really impressive though. A computer made up those lines, which is very impressive, but they're not that good, so.
Okay. Did you like my questions though?
I liked them. I like how like abstract they were. I feel like a lot of questions are very specific, and I like that those were kind of could mean a lot of different things. I've been asked the same question a lot of times, kind of in like different ways, but it's like still the same question. What's nice about this is that Mr. AI is not trying to cause anything. He's just wondering. He just wants to know. But I appreciate you, AI. I appreciate you for not judging me and not trying to get something out of me to cause some sort of heat all over the internet. I appreciate it.
So this is like very interesting to me because, as technologists, we are always talking about AI bias and how training sets are all messed up and like bias things in one direction or another, which is definitely true. But it's interesting from Billy's perspective is that the AI was asking questions that were unbiased, unlike the human interviewers who are normally asking her questions. Because the human interviewers are usually trying to like get her to say something salacious or like get something out of her, and she didn't feel that with the AI, which was like, just like sort of mind-blowing for me. So another theme that I think that I like to explore in my work is just like how science fiction, the relationship between our technology and science fiction, and how much science fiction actually informs real technology. And on the sort of last parting note, so I worked at Google for 2 years, and then I decided to leave to pursue my own work and mostly focus actually on video games. And something I've been thinking a lot about is just sort of the difference between video games and creative technology in terms of industries, but also in terms of like what the projects actually are. And so these days, what I'm doing is I'm actually, I'm making video games. I'm working on 2 long-term projects, which is new for me because like all my projects, like the ones I showed, were all like weeks-long projects, but now I'm working on years-long projects because it turns out it takes like an extremely long amount of time to make video games. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I think we're gonna do questions now, but yeah, thank you. I'm on like Twitter and stuff. And my email's hi@nicole.pizza. My website's nicole.pizza. So if you have questions, you can ask them now or later, reach out, whatever. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm gonna use the bully pulpit of being the moderator to ask a very important question, which is, do you ever wear headphones with sounds in them?
Thank you for asking that question that my AI generated. And yes, I do.
Cool. I love Billy's response to that. She's so used to having very rote questions asked that the AI was just tripping her up left and right.
I loved how just open she was to just like go for it with this and just like, just fully, really seriously answer each question.
It was like she was being interviewed by a child.
Yeah.
Right? And she kind of gave it she had the kind of the graciousness and openness of just kind of, all right, let's see where this goes. It was pretty amazing. Yeah. If folks have actual questions and not questions that they have stolen from Nicole's own AI work, feel free to raise your tiny blue hand or type your question into the chat. whichever way you are more comfortable with is awesome. While we're waiting, I have another actual question, which is I feel like a lot of work, particularly around voice and text and AI and machine learning, just as this kind of inherent humor to it. At least that's how I often read it, is we're kind of laughing at it. But at the same time,
or my internet is bad.
Oh,
sorry, can you say that again? I think my internet just cut out.
It could be mine also. I was just saying that often I feel like a thing I've noticed with work around text and voice and AI and machine learning is there's this kind of inherent humor that can kind of play out in, to my mind, two ways. One is us kind of somehow feeling this nervous superiority to the technology of like, ah ha ha, it doesn't understand. But on the other side, it also reminds me a lot of just kind of dark, absurdist humor, where there's kind of an almost nihilism to it. So I guess I'm curious how you think about that.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it is usually inherently funny because the technology is bad or it's like it doesn't work that well right now. It's and I think with voice technology, because voice is one of those things, like we use our voices, we speak to each other in real life, we have a clear model of how we think it should work when we're talking to somebody, and it just doesn't work that way when we talk to computers. Even as the technology has advanced a lot and is getting better, it's not as good as talking to a person. And again, it comes back for me to that gap between our expectations of how the technology works and how it actually works. And then in that gap, a lot of times is humor, because there's that misunderstanding part. And I think voice in particular is another thing that is really informed by science fiction, because in every sci-fi movie, they're talking to computers in Star Trek, and the computers always understand them perfectly. Like in almost everything, every kind of media that has a computer that talks out loud or listens to you, or has voice commands, whatever. Like it always works perfectly. And so when it doesn't happen that way, the failings get exposed so easily, and it's usually pretty funny.
It's true. It's true. It also kind of exposes language's interface, right? Like I think in the interview you did with Jamin Warren for Kill Screen, he kind of comments about that with, I don't know if it's Alexa or Google or Apple, whichever device he happens to have, that he's found himself having to adapt to a particular dialect of English in order to be able to communicate.
Yeah, totally.
And so it gets past the humor piece. It also makes me think of that game Hey Robot, where you're trying to get the device to say something to you, in hilarity ensues.
Yeah.
Because we can't quite figure out how to get things out of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. You have to learn how to speak to it. You can't expect to speak to it like a human. But then there's something also interesting, like as a person building things with it, is that like I think it depends on how technology savvy somebody is, but expectations are actually quite low, I think, in terms of how well computers understand us. And so actually, if you pull off a magic trick where it feels like it did understand you more than you thought it would, it actually it feels amazing. It's a thing that can be really surprising and effective, which is also why it's still a medium that I'm interested in working with, because it's like, yeah, because it can feel really interesting.
I mean, to me, there's a real strong connection between your Tinder swipe project and these voice projects, right? It's like
Yeah.
that. Like I always love watching that rubber hand, and it's sort of awkward. Like, ugh, what am I doing? How do I use this thing that we take for granted? The way we're engaging, were you? What were you thinking about when you were doing that kind of that physical part of that project? And like, how did you take a long time to pick that hand?
I think I just like found it on Amazon. I mean, I think what I was thinking, like, I had this idea for this project in the middle of the night, and I was like, this is a good idea. And then, because I was a first semester student, I was learning how to do these things for the first time, and it was like a real struggle. Like every single piece was a real struggle in that way. And and so I think I was just trying to get it to work. But I forget when I decided to use sort of a realistic looking hand, but it felt right for the project. And it really added to that sort of like uncanny valley feeling.
I think it does really. It was just sort of fascinating watching it. Uh, a very smart question from Shin. Could you give our BFA and MFA students some tips on documenting interactive projects and how you contextualize these projects to the wider public?
Yeah. So, I think it's really important to document your projects. I'm sure people like teachers and are always like saying that. And then also having been a student, I totally understand not wanting to do it, or like not feeling like it's worth the effort or something like that. I think what's really useful for me is trying to make, I mean, it's not even just about documenting the project. It starts from making the project in the first place, like trying to make projects that have ideas that are easily understandable. And it's not like every project I ever made, especially in school, was like that, because you have different reasons for making projects. But if I think the clarity of the concept, even if it's, there is nuance and it's complex and there's like different parts to it or something like that, I think it is really important, not just in the documenting phase, but in the coming up with the idea phase, that there's a clear idea that can be expressed in like a line of text and somebody looking at it, like looking at a gif of it or something. Like this isn't, obviously this is just from my perspective, this isn't the only valid way to make projects or something like that, but I think it has to be simple enough. I feel like as students, we have the tendency to overcomplicate ideas or trying to cram a lot of things into one thing. And you can have that stuff, but there still has to be a basic, simple idea that has to be easily understood. And it's not easy to do that. But for me, I think my best projects are the ones that are the simplest to understand, even if I feel like there's a lot of complex thought behind it and things like that. So that goes into documentation as well. I think being able to document, like if the project should be like that, but the documentation should also be like that, and express ideas clearly.
And that's awesome advice. Sohi, who appears to be Jason.
Yeah, this time anyway. Hi, Nicole. Thanks for the presentation. I really liked the Billie Eilish question. I kind of have a question about that process, because it was interesting, like watching it on social media as like, because I understood it to be your project because of like the way your tweets were happening about it, but like to also see the public side of it, be Vogue saying that this robot interviewing Billie Eilish, and even Billie Eilish herself saying that in the interview, she's like, oh, but this robot doesn't see me this way. The robot is doing this. And I was curious how you thought about your authorship of that project, as like, like you were saying, it kind of gets lost in that linguistic level of it. It's like, yeah, you were working with GPT-2, but you also were involved with the selection of the data and also the production and selection of all the questions that were used. So I was really curious about just how you kind of envision that relationship of yours with the project.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's true, and it's true for every project that you make where there's a computer character, and which is like so many of my projects, like the Billie Eilish one, the even the Tinder robot. Like, who is the robot, right? I wrote those that the lines of text that the robot reads or says, and for that project, so that project was unique in that there was a level of movie magic that you know, that makes sense for the project because the project is a video. Like, that's the purpose of that project, was to make a video. And so there was a level of movie magic, and it wasn't just me as the author of the text. It was, I mean, other people working at Vogue who had actually selected the questions to ask. I mean, I generated a bunch of them and sent them over. They picked the ones to ask. Like, I think, I don't feel, in that project, it's not like I felt erased or something like that, because it's part of what goes into basically coming up with computer characters, is that it's always like that. It's always created by people in the background, and if you know these things, you will read the credits and know who actually made this, essentially. But it's interesting to think about the entity of the characters, like, that don't actually exist, which we're willing to do a lot of times for AI, right? And so, yeah, so for that project, it's like it was interesting. I feel like I didn't feel ownership over the AI or something like that, but it was a collaboration between me and a lot of other people.
Another question in the chat here from L'Oreal. In much of the work you presented, the AI had a particularly computerized voice. Can you talk a little more about your decision to add more or less natural voice inflection in a particular interaction? From your perspective, is natural voice inflection at odds with our idealized version of the computer entity?
So I don't have that much of a choice usually in sort of how the inflection sounds, just because there are very specific speech synthesis tools and technology and voices that the computers offer, and they're pretty limited. So I usually have used whatever was available. Essentially, they usually give you a couple options. But for your other question, is a natural voice inflection at odds with our version of the computer entity? I actually think that I think I've given a talk about this. I think that computer voices should not sound human. I think that they should, I think they can keep trying to improve them such that they are more like easy to listen to, because the sort of monotonous computer voice can be like difficult or it's boring to listen to. So I think they can work on that kind of stuff, but I don't think it should sound explicitly human. Like, you see, if you like look up whatever advances that these companies are making in speech synthesis, it's always making it sound more and more like a person, like tricking you into thinking that it's a person. And I actually think that computers should sound like computers, whatever that means. I think we should intentionally give them their own type of voice, because I don't think it's necessarily useful I don't think the goal for computer speech is to be as human as possible, in my opinion.
Another question from the chat from Emily. From the Billie Eilish's interview, and how she thinks the AI is not biased when it was asking her the questions. Is that something you want to do within future projects, to make AI or games that aren't biased?
Well, I think it's impossible to make AI that isn't biased, or games. It's impossible to make any work that's not biased, right? But I think it's important that built in within the project itself, like, you shouldn't be trying to do something that requires the AI to be unbiased. I mean, I guess this is like the benefit of being an artist and not somebody who's trying to, I don't know, create self-driving cars or something like that, where you're trying to do something very, very, very difficult and the data set's going to be biased and you're going to struggle with that. But as an artist, I think there's something we can do, or there's a way to frame projects such that you don't have to try to do the impossible, which is get unbiased data, and more think about how the biases that are going to be inherent to your project can contribute to the project, essentially.
Hammers have bias. Right. Richard Tay provides the next question. As he refers to it, the typical what's next question. Why did you decide to work on a long-term project? How do you like working with this within this time frame? And what's the game about? He's trying to get that salacious tidbit out of you.
Yeah.
Will help this blow up on the internet.
So I think it's just a feeling of greater ambition in terms of making creative work that is more difficult, more polished, more collaborative, better. And usually those things require time. And so, yeah, I think, I've been making lots of small projects here and there. And, they're all pretty unpolished, which is fine for what they are. But I was like, but can I push myself to make stuff that is bigger? And it's scary, right? Because like you make a small project, it's fine. Maybe some people like it, maybe whatever. And like, but it's harder to do with, it is more challenging with a big project that I'm going to spend a lot of time on that, when it comes out, maybe it goes badly or something like that. That's obviously like more risky or difficult or something on a personal level, but I also really wanted to have that kind of challenge. And how do I like working in the time frame? It's difficult. It's hard because it's not like, I feel like with a short-term project, a 3-week project or something that you do, it's pretty simple from idea to make the thing, and it's not exactly perfect, but you get it working and it's great. But with a long-term project, more complex project, like the creative process is like absolutely not linear. Like, I sort of expect like, oh, we start from here and we just like keep going and then we keep going and then like the thing's done. It's not like that. It's more like a loop where you like do a bunch of stuff and then you question everything that you did. And then you maybe start over and then you try some other stuff. And then at the end, you realize the best idea was the first one that you had like 6 months ago. So it's collaborative. Like I'm working with teams of people who I really respect, and that's really good. So we're going through that all together. So there are challenges, but hopefully it'll be worth it in the end. What's the game about? I'm working on 2 games. Yeah, one is a sci-fi. Anything about yet because that's going to be a commercial indie game, and it's too early.
Cool. We didn't get a salacious tidbit out of you, unfortunately, for the internet's sake, but oh well. We'll try again some other day. I think we're about out of time. Thank you so much, Nicole. It was really awesome
Thank you.
hearing about your work and what your thoughts on these things. Some thanks, in addition to thanking Nicole. Thanks to Richard and Shin and Sven Travis, who organized Cloud Salon. Thanks, you 3. And then Richard gets bonus extra helping of thanks for also doing the graphic design. Sam Morrison, who works with some of us here in MFADT, helps coordinate things. I'm supposed to thank myself. I'm not going to do that. And Melanie Crean, who provides some of the kind of program level support. One comment down here that just popped up. Juwon, he just want to show some personal appreciation to Nicole I happened to see her work online. That makes me first discover the existence of programs that combine arts and creative technology and also inspire me to make a decision to come here in some way. Awesome.
Wow.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm so glad.
Those are the kinds of comments that make these things worthwhile, isn't it? All right. Well, thank you again, everybody. I hope you all have a good weekend. And